thank you for being here on the Destroy Manila podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Elliot Compton today, and he's going to share his story for you and for everyone who watches the show.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me.
How are you, sir? Are you currently preparing for something already?
My next fight is on July 9 in Brisbane. First fight back home in Brisbane for 6 years. So pretty exciting.
Oh, I know you've been around a lot. I mean, you've even been here in the Philippines for a few times.
Yeah, I have. I've fought in the Philippines once, but I've been to the Philippines many times training and running seminars and things like that. So I love it in the Philippines, man. I have a good time every time I'm there.
So just to go back a little bit, what made you start in martial arts? I mean, I know you've been in the scene for like at least 10 years, right?
Yeah, definitely. Longer than 10 years, closer to 15 as a fighter. I've been training martial arts since I could walk. My dad was my coach, still is. I used to see him go to the gym all the time, and all I wanted to do was do the same, So I just a natural progression that as soon as I was old enough, I started following him to the gym, and then I'd take part in the kids class, and then I'd start like learning how to punch and kick, and then I'd learn how to grapple a little bit, and then over time it just kind of ran away from me, and done a lot of the Eskrimo and Arnis and things like that over the years of Filipino martial arts as well. And I've just always been in love with martial arts and the lifestyle that it gives me. So it's just been a natural progression to get to where I am today.
When did you decide that, hey, I guess it's time to test my thing and become an actual fighter?
Yeah, I was actually training in Thailand. I just was there actually like on a training holiday more than anything. I wasn't necessarily there planning to have a fight. Mm-hmm. And the opportunity came up, and I thought, you know what, let's tick the box. I'm here. I always said that I'd love to have a fight in Thailand one day. And the opportunity was like presented to me, so it seemed like it was just like perfect, So we did it. I had a really tough fight against a really like strong opponent. He'd had over 250 fights, and this is my debut. And I didn't win. I had a good fight. I kind of gave as much as I took. Ultimately, he got the win. But I just fell in love with fighting from that point, and that's all I wanted to do for the rest of my life, And then from there, I just literally went all in on it. I just couldn't stop, And I kind of always just planned on going like one fight at a time, Like I'll fight this fight, and the next fight will come up, and the next fight. And then before I knew, I looked back 15 years later, and I made it to the top. It's been a really, really cool journey to travel the world and fight guys in different countries from all over the place and different rule sets, and to do it all alongside my family and my dad, have him in my corner every time. It's, man, it's been a special journey so far. I still feel like we're only really just getting started, So, yeah.
So 15 years in the fight team and multiple titles. It started like, can we say that it's like an accident? You started going into fighting?
Yeah, I guess, like growing up and stuff, I never ever would have thought that I'd be a professional fighter, I always loved to fight, don't get me wrong, like growing up, and I was always in trouble at school and on the street and things like that. I grew up in an area where like fighting was just a part of life, you walk home from school and you get jumped all the time and things like that. So kind of like fighting itself, it wasn't necessarily new to me, but professional fighting definitely was. And it just turned out that I happened to be good at it, you see a lot of guys that train a long time, train their whole life, and then they step in and fight, and it just doesn't really pay off for them, And you see the other guys that like train 3 months and have a fight, and they're like killers, like guys like Mark Hunt and things like that, like they're not like necessarily like trained for years, but it just comes naturally to them, I kind of feel like I fit somewhere in between those two, So yeah, like you could say accident, definitely, like organic, however you want to call it, it is what it is, and here we are 15 years later, still living the dream, 60 fights in.
Wow, 60 fights.
Yeah.
15 years.
Still good looking
Probably
though,
have a
huh?
lot of yeah. Probably have a lot of battle scars now.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
but
definitely.
with all of those fights that you've had, which one can you say is the most memorable? At least name five or something.
Oh, most memorable. Hard to pick just one.
Mhm.
Definitely my fight at Lumpini Stadium in 2012 when I won by spin elbow knockout third round and won knockout of the night award. Um, Lumpini was always like a massive deal for me, even before I planned on being a fighter. Like I'd always wanted to go and experience like that energy. So to get to fight at the original Lumpini Stadium and win by knockout in front of like a Thai crowd on the main night, on the main show, was like really, really special. Second would probably be my fight against Cosmo in Manila.
Yeah.
That was my debut for one. I took it on short notice. I got offered to fight that fight MMA originally, and we'd agreed to it to make my MMA debut against Cosmo, who was 8-1 MMA at the time. And then it all kind of got changed, and we ended up fighting Muay Thai rules. But that was a special fight for me too. I didn't win the fight, but I won a lot in myself. From going from being like I'm never on the couch, don't get me wrong, like I'm always training, but to go from like not having a sniff of a fight to then bang within 2 weeks of training and then a week of fight week, there I was in Mall of Asia Arena with 21,000 screaming Filipino fans. It was unreal, man. Like I'll never forget walking out and seeing like the Filipino crowd just light up, and it's a really, really, really cool moment, and it's something that I'll remember for the rest of my life. So although I didn't win the fight, I definitely won a lot for myself and my memories and stories to tell. It's a really cool experience.
I heard you are going to actually debut in MMA soon. So is that usually the transition for a lot of Muay Thai fighters, and after quite some time of doing just striking only, then they think of maybe looking for other options like MMA?
I think as a general rule, it seems to be happening a lot. You see guys like Israel Adesanya, Alex Pereira, and people like that all transitioning across. But I think for me, it is slightly different. I've trained in every asset of MMA since I started this sport. It's not like I just only trained Muay Thai and kickboxing and started doing jiu-jitsu a couple of years ago and decided to fight MMA. I'm a brown belt in jiu-jitsu. I kind of consider myself a grappler before I was ever even a striker. And my whole career I've trained with MMA guys. I've trained with some of the best MMA guys that Australia's ever had to offer. Traveled the world and trained with some very, very high level MMA guys that like ex-UFC champions like Rafael dos Anjos and Alan Belcher and people like this that over the years. So yeah, I mean, like obviously I've had like a pretty credentialed striking career, and I've fought like some of the greatest fighters of all time, many of the greatest fighters of all time, in my opinion. But it just seemed like I got to a point where I've always said my whole career that when the right opportunity presents itself, I'll fight MMA. At the time, I was very focused on my Muay Thai career because I was just absolutely in love with Muay Thai and the culture and the history and everything that came with that. But that being said, like I also still loved MMA. I watch the UFC every week, and I watch Bellator. I watch the one fight, like one MMA fight. So I watch everything. But Beatdown Promotions came to me and offered me this perfect opportunity to fight Takuya Oyama in my hometown. I haven't fought in my hometown since 2016. And I just thought, man, this is the time, I hadn't fought now since I last fought for one, which was back in December of 2020. I had a bit of a frustrating year. I wanted to be super active in 2021, but it just didn't happen, So when this came up, it was like, man, this is it, I've been training more than MMA fighters, but they've all been active and getting ready for fights. I've been the training partner. I've been on the mats, wrestling, doing jiu-jitsu, everything 2-3 times a day, every day for the last since forever, really, but mainly since my last fight. So it just seemed like, hey man, this is the right time to do this. This is the organic transition that we've been waiting for. Great opponent. He's had a bunch of amateurs. He's had 15 pro boxing fights, competed jiu-jitsu, competed everything. He like fights for deep. He's a stud opponent, and it just seemed like, this is the perfect opportunity. So we signed the contract and got it done. So I'm excited, man.
How prepared are you? Do you think for your upcoming fight?
Man, I think that I'm over prepared. I always am every time I step in. I literally, I never leave a stone unturned in my camp. I'm a real hustler in the gym. I work harder than just about anyone else that I know all the time, particularly in fight camp. So, I was only saying to somebody recently that said, so what do you really just focus on your wrestling and jiu-jitsu now? Because obviously you're striking some point, but it's like, yeah, to a degree, but not really. Like, yeah, my striking is great, but there's always room for improvement, and although I had a very MMA style striking base for Muay Thai and kickboxing anyway, we started to make some adjustments and make some additions and kind of change the approach that we've had. But we've made some massive improvements in that time as well, So not only has my striking gone through the roof, my wrestling and jiu-jitsu, where I'm now training with a bit more of a direct purpose of like a specific opponent, even that's like just like tenfold. Like even today, I felt like I had another breakthrough yet again today, So my cardio is like the best that it's ever been. I'm strong, I'm fit. I definitely feel like my preparation has gone absolutely perfect for this one. So I just got to put it all into play on fight night now.
Yeah, speaking of that, would you believe that, first, depending on the fight, you're supposed to be training at a certain level? Like if you train in a smaller event versus a way bigger event, or is the training going to be the same?
Yeah, training's the same for me. It always has been. From like my first fight to now, I train like I'm fighting for a world title, no matter what. Doesn't matter who the opponent is, whether I'm the favorite, the underdog, it doesn't matter, And I'm fortunate that my coach, my dad, he has always raised me that way, and he still holds me true to that even to this day. I can't ever cut corners because it gets called out in the gym, not just by my dad and my coach, by all my training partners and everything. Not that I ever plan on cutting corners. I think I've experienced enough in this game. Like I've had 60 fights now. I know that if you're not bringing the absolute most to your training and you're not getting the most out of every single training session, you're cutting corners and you're being lazy, it's going to come out under the bright lights. There's no hiding when you get locked inside that cage and it's just the two of you, and he's been doing the work and he's been hustling and he's been on the right diet and he's been doing everything right, and you've been kind of like, a bit of this, bit of that, bit of this, bit of that. It might not happen in the first round, it might not happen in the first round at all, but there's going to come a point in that fight where you're going to look and go, man, I should have hustled harder, and everybody else around the world is going to witness you have that like epiphany, So for me, I make sure that never happens. Like that sort of thing keeps me awake at night, man. I could never allow myself to feel that on fight night. So for me, like I said, it doesn't matter the fight, it doesn't matter the opponent, it doesn't matter the scale of the show, it doesn't matter anything. I train 100% all of the time.
That's definitely the champ mindset that all fighters need. We've seen how fighters who, I don't think it's too good to call them lazy, but when during fights you'd probably assume if they were really giving their everything during training, right? I mean, it will definitely show.
Absolutely. I mean, like you find how you train. You don't just rise to the level to the level on fight night. You don't rise to the occasion. So it's like if you don't know how to give 100% because you've never done it in the gym, how do you expect to do it on fight night in front of 21,000 screaming fans? It's not going to happen, like because you've never been there before. It's uncharted territory. You have to know that when you've been there, you have to remove every bit of environmental stress and everything out of the game as much as you can. So then when you're in there, nothing is unfamiliar. You've been there, you've done it. You know how it feels. You know the emotion that you feel. You know how the physical feeling feels. You understand. everything feels familiar and everything feels like home, you know. So if you're only ever used to kind of going 50-60% in the gym and you try and give 100% on fight night, it's going to feel very foreign and you're not going to feel comfortable and you're not going to be able to maintain it.
And we know that the fight game is not only physical, it's also a mental and emotional game. So with that, can you share to us how you felt when you won your first title?
Yeah, for sure, man. It was like a really amazing moment. It was like getting my hand raised. I'd had a wild fight. I dropped the guy that I fought. I think from memory, I dropped him twice in just about every round. I couldn't quite get the finish. It was tough, but I dropped him a lot. I dropped him with head kicks. I dropped him with punches. I dropped him with knees. Man, I dropped him with just about everything that you could, But he was a tough dude, man. He kept coming back and he wanted that title, But I remember getting my hand raised and then put the belt around me, and it was like this feeling of like achievement and satisfaction that all of the hard work that I've done and all the sacrifices that me and my family and my wife and everyone had made to get to that moment, it all paid off, And it was like, okay, well, like, how do I get that feeling again? Well, let's defend it, and then let's go after the next title up. And then it just becomes like this, almost like an addiction, you know what I mean? Where you're like, oh man, I've got to get that next hit. You know what I mean? I've got to feel that feeling again. And it's like, if I've done this, imagine if I do it again and I can get this. You know what I mean? And yeah, it's an amazing feeling.
All the adrenaline rush, the crazy crowd that watches you every time you fight. It's just I'm pretty sure it's a great feeling. It pushes you to perform even better when fighting, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is gonna be a crazy question, but of all the places you've fought, which place is the best audience for you?
Oh, good question. I'll give you 3 answers, right? For different reasons.
Yeah.
Thailand, Lumpini Stadium, the original Lumpini Stadium.
Yeah.
With all the tires, they have the fence and all the tires. You see, like, they got their phone, they're all gambling, and they're like, the energy is just something that you've never witnessed before. They like the whole stadium is buzzing all of the time. And it's something that I don't think can ever be replicated. And to be honest, I don't know if it even really still exists anymore. It was 10 years ago that I last fought at Lumpini Stadium, and that was the original, the old Lumpini, which has now been shut over and things like that. I'm not sure what the actual crowd rules are now, but definitely the original Lumpini Stadium was up there. Manila was another one. Manila blew my mind. Especially because I have such a strong connection with the Philippines anyway, through training with the Filipino martial arts, and I've been there a bunch of times training and also running seminars and things like that. So yeah, I love the Filipino culture. I love it. It was just a really, really cool experience. The crowd was just super supportive and vocal and whatever else. And the third one would be in Myanmar. Those guys, we opened the card in Myanmar when I fought Matt Semper for one championship. And at the press conference, I remember saying, hey man, they put us early on the card. They told me behind the scenes at the press conference backstage, hey, we put on the start of the card because we know your fight's going to be entertaining and we want to start the night with a bang, And I said at the press conference, I said to all the crowd, hey, man, we're the first fight of the night. Let's show the rest of the card. This is where it's going to start from. If it starts here, it can only get to here. You know what I mean? And I remember fighting. It was maybe 30 seconds into the first round. Bang! I dropped him with a stiff jab right on the button, and I could barely hear myself think. That crowd was it was ear piercing how loud they were. And same thing later on in the fight. I dropped him again, and it was crazy. And I remember at the end of the fight, I jumped up on the top of the ring, on top of the cage, sorry. And I was I remember looking around, and there was people with no shirts on with glow sticks, and the whole thing was just a massive party for them. You know what I mean? And then when their champion Aung La and Sung came out to fight that for the main event that night, I've never seen anything like it, you know. And I've been to football games in the UK. I've been to like ice hockey games in America. I've been to like NBA games, everything. I've seen so many wild, like cool sporting environments, but I've never seen anything like that, you know. Yeah, it was such a cool experience. So yeah, definitely top three: Lumpini Stadium, Mall of Asia Arena, and Yangon City. It was unreal.
Those countries are definitely some of the countries that love fighting. I mean,
Yeah.
I think love is an understatement. If there's a better word for that, I don't know what it is,
Yeah.
but they're crazy about it.
Absolutely.
What about your in Australia? How big is the Muay Thai scene there now, and well, the MMA scene?
Yeah, the Muay Thai scene going back 10 years ago was absolutely huge. Probably the biggest combat sports scene there was in Australia for a long time. Between the Muay Thai and the kickboxing down in the southern states in like Victoria and New South Wales more so, but particularly like Queensland, New South Wales bit, and WA, like Western Australia, the Muay Thai scene was huge. You know, we had like huge events like Evolution Promotions. I don't know if you ever heard of them. They were like one of the biggest Muay Thai promotions in the world at one point. You know, they'd fly in like the best of the best. But over time, it kind of like just fizzled a little bit, in my opinion. Like there's a bit of a change of the guard here in Australia, and a few of the older fighters retired, and a few of the younger guys came through, and the landscape kind of like just didn't really have the same effect as it did. You know, like at one point, like the guys that were fighting in Australia were like guys like John Wayne Parr, Nathan Corbett, Preacher, Eugene Eckelboom, Dane Daddy Cool. Like these guys were like all global superstars, you know, and they're all like based here in my state of Queensland. You know, most of them in Brisbane. You know, so it was huge, but then it kind of died off a little bit, but it's definitely picked back up. And we've got some really great Muay Thai fighters coming through the scene here now. Some young guys that are killers, and so even some older guys that are still doing quite well. But I definitely think that the MMA is really kind of taken over here in Australia. You know, that's really kind of like where the peak of the sport is. Australian boxing has actually picked up again a lot too. There's like really, really phenomenal Australian boxers coming out at the moment. And I mean, we just had a sold out show down at Marvel Stadium in Victoria for Cambosis. I think that was like 50,000 people. Which is a massive event for Australia, you know. But I still think like the MMA is definitely like the main combat sport in Australia at the moment, and I think it'll stay that way. It'll kind of surpass everything over time, I think.
With that, let's just relate it a bit. The boxing, the Muay Thai, and the MMA. Personally, would you think that in the next maybe 5 or 10 years, MMA could completely take over boxing and Muay Thai?
I think for a little bit, it looked like it was going to go that way. But I think One Championship have done an absolute phenomenal job on exposing high-level Muay Thai and kickboxing fighters to the mainstream MMA crowd. You know, like when they did the trade with Ben Askren and Demetrius Johnson, they got Eddie Alvarez, they got a bunch of the big names that were in the UFC that everybody kind of like, whether you're like an absolute diehard MMA fan or even just a casual fan, you still knew these guys and you'd always tune in to watch them, even if you're not really like following the sport. And they mixed the cards so well. You know, they had these like top MMA guys that everyone loved to watch, and then they fill the cards with like guys like Rod Tang and Nicky Holzken and myself and Cosmo and people like that. And then like the Cosmo and Sage Northcutt fight, for example, everyone went, "Whoa, man, who are these guys? We'd never even heard of. We didn't know these guys existed." You know. And it really kind of like boosted the sport of Muay Thai and kickboxing. I mean, like you look at guys like Rod Tang and people like that, the amount of money that they're making through One Championship now and through seminars and appearances and things like that would never have happened 5 years ago. So I think in that regard, they've done a great job of keeping Muay Thai alive and making it entertaining, and they've kind of like branded it quite well to make it more mainstream than what it was, but I also think the same thing for boxing too. I think people these days, they've learned now that they just love to watch a good scrap. They don't necessarily care if it's MMA, boxing, or Thai boxing, as long as there's two guys hitting each other and it's entertaining, and everybody's got like a good brand and a good character and things like that. People are tuning in. For a long time, like people in Australia thought that boxing was really starting to fade away, but like you look at some of these young guys coming through now, man, and I think Australia is going to be at the top of the sport across all the disciplines. We'll literally have world champion boxers that are like household names, world champion Thai boxers that are household names, world champion MMA guys that are household names. I think that's where we'll be in 5 years' time.
With that, what do you think has changed in the Australian martial arts landscape that, for some reason, upgraded everyone's skills?
I think education more than anything. I don't think it's necessarily the skills have been updated. I think it's more so it's the crowd that's been educated more. The crowd now sees that the boxers and the Thai boxers and the kickboxers do the same work and put in the same amount of hours in the gym and on the road as the MMA guys do. They all have a skill set that's respected to the same level now, whereas I think for a long time people would look at high-level boxing and say, oh, that's boring, But the only reason why they thought that is because they didn't have an understanding of what boxing truly was. They didn't see the actual intricacies of the sweet science of boxing, Same thing with like MMA. For a long time, people hated a jiu-jitsu fighter. They hated a wrestler. They hated a grappler. But there's been so much more education now with the growth of social media and YouTube and things like this that people now actually have a greater understanding and a greater respect for guys that can wrestle. Look at Khabib. He's an absolute superstar. Yeah. 8 to 10 years ago, no one would have given him a second thought. They would have been like, oh, whatever, he just grapples it, you know what I mean? But when you can see him, man, these guys know what he's going to do. Look at Ronda Rousey, for example. Everybody knew that she was going to armbar them, but she still did it. And when you understand how hard that is to do, which I think people really educated themselves on, that's when they were like, oh, wow, man, all of these sports and all of these disciplines and all of these athletes all have such a unique and special talent that people are just respected a lot more now, I think.
Or kind of takeaway is that with the actual development of the sport, the combat sports, the fans must upgrade as well, must develop their understanding of it as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I think over time, they'll just learn more and more and more. And we'll just continue to see the sports go from strength to strength,
Maybe you want to promote your upcoming fight?
Yeah.
Where can we watch that, by the way, if it's going to be shown on the stream or something?
Yeah, so Beatdown Promotions are going to release the stream this week. Don't quote me on this. I'm not 100%. I think it might be on YouTube. I'm not 100%. But yeah, so basically it's July 9 here in Brisbane, Australia. I'm fighting Takuya Oyama from Japan. Like I said, he has fought for Deep. He's fought for a lot of the major promotions in Japan. 11-6 record, 15 pro boxing fights. A lot of his wins have come by submission. He's won a few by knockout, so he's definitely an all-rounded guy. The card is absolutely stacked. We've got I don't know if you've heard of Junior Tuffa, who's a Glory Kickboxing. I think he was the number 1 contender. At one point, he's also making his MMA debut against another guy from Japan called Sakino. Then we've got guys like Matt Franku, who's probably one of the best welterweights in Australia, fighting Matt Vale, who's one of the best welterweights in the whole region. Then we've got some older guys coming back, like Ryan Mortimer. You guys probably haven't heard of him, but he was a former Australian champion. He hasn't fought here in 13 years, and he's coming back for so there's a lot of really good fights on this card. Some really good amateur fights. I think it's going to be a really cool event for everybody around the world to tune in to watch.
Thank you for that. We'll check their YouTube channel. Hopefully they allow us to watch the fight
Yeah, they will. Yeah.
Yeah. What is your opinion on MMA fighters or Muay Thai fighters suddenly going into boxing, probably chasing the money or something? Guys like McGregor or some of the other MMA fighters trying to be boxers these days.
Yeah, I think yeah, you have to define what a boxer is at that point, right? There's people that do boxing, and then there's boxers, in my opinion, you know.
Yeah.
And it's very hard for guys like myself and other like MMA guys and Thai boxers and things like that to compete at a high level with professional boxers. You think professional boxers focus purely on their hands every single day. I mean, you see that like some of these guys like McGregor and Nate Diaz and people like that, they have great boxing for MMA or for Thai boxing or whatever, but that doesn't translate to great boxing. It's two different things. Like I consider myself that I've got great hands. I've got great hands for Thai boxing, kickboxing, and MMA. I would never call myself a boxer. I'm not a boxer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I can box within the rule set that I compete in, but that doesn't make me a boxer, you know? So yeah, I think a lot of them just try and sell that facade for a bigger payday, because obviously boxing does have a lot more money in it at the moment, especially high level, you know, when you see guys like, what's his name, Jake Paul and stuff, you know, the money that he paid Tyron Woodley was like in one fight he made the sum of all of his MMA title fights or something crazy like that. Don't quote me exactly, but it was like he made a lot of money, you know. So I think they're all like, I mean, like McGregor made 115 million or something off that Mayweather fight, like that, you know. So I mean, you kind of can't blame them when they're gone from fighting for like, you know, Nate Diaz, for example, is probably, I don't know, I'm guessing somewhere between 300,000 to 500,000 a fight to go, you know what? Let's go and make 5 mil over here. You know what I mean? Yeah, of course they're going to try and sell the fight. You know what I mean? They know they're not boxers. They're just trying to get a payday. I guess that they're of the opinion I can be anything if the cash is right, you know? I mean, sometimes it's entertaining. Sometimes it's cringe. I mean, I personally quite enjoyed the McGregor Mayweather fight. You know, I'm a huge Mayweather fan. I like McGregor. I think he's a supreme athlete. It was entertaining. The Woodley Jake Paul fight, not for me. But hey, man, like a lot of people enjoyed it. I guess I'm just looking through different eyes, you know.
Yeah, and just one last. You being a professional fighter, what's your opinion on YouTubers, TikTokers, Instagrammers who go into fighting?
Blows my mind. Absolutely blows my mind. Good on them, you know. Man, I respect anyone that laces up the gloves and steps through the ropes and has a crack. You know, it's not easy to do, especially when you already have a following and you know there's millions of people around the world that want to see you win, but there's also the same amount of millions around the world that want to see you face down on canvas. You know what I mean? The thing that I guess most fighters would find frustrating is some of these YouTubers and TikTokers are getting paid 10, 20, 30, 50 times what a lot of these athletes that have dedicated their life to the sport are getting. And I know it's a business. I know that like the numbers add up or whatever else. But I think that can be the frustrating part for guys that have absolutely dedicated their life to a sport. And it's like, you know, you imagine someone like Cristiano Ronaldo, let's say he's getting paid 10 mil a year, and then some dude from TikTok steps up and plays one game of football and makes 50 million. He'd be like, well, hang on a second. You know, if there's that kind of money in this sport, it's obviously going in the wrong pockets. Yeah. But I mean, like you said, it all comes down to viewership and business, and I get all that. But man, I guess to be honest, it boosts the sport. You know, I guess people tune in to watch these TikTokers and YouTubers and go, I actually enjoyed watching this fight. Let's watch Jake Paul. I enjoyed that. Let's watch McGregor. Let's watch you, and then they become lifelong fans. Hopefully, you know. Yeah. So yeah.
Thank you for this opportunity. It was definitely a pleasure hearing you speak about your journey and everything.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Everyone, Elliot Compton, thank you very much. And good luck to your upcoming fight.
Thank you. See you guys soon.